We're back. Second half. We took our little break. Casey Solomon, PhytoLab, not labs. That's
correct.
Different.
Yeah.
PhytoLab. So you're, you're a very well-educated person, and you've decided to work in the cannabis industry here in Minnesota. Are you doing that in part because of your own affection for cannabis, or do you see a deeper mission? Like, what's?
I mean, yeah, twofold, right? Like, the cannabis has been villainized or vilified, right, for far too long. Right.
Yep.
Look at things as, especially in a society where we say tobacco and alcohol are legal,
Fine.
and we can
Lots
make
of
real
other
arguments.
shit. Cheetos.
Right.
Sure.
Exactly.
You know, I love
Exactly.
them. Don't get me wrong, I love Cheetos. Thanks for sponsoring us, Frito-Lay or
Yeah, right?
Yeah, it is Frito-Lay, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they haven't gotten back to us yet.
They're tough. They're tough to get.
They're gonna send us some Cheetos, I bet, once they say no. But
yeah, that's how you do it. You just keep shooting out the requests until you get free stuff back.
Thanks for the Cheetos.
We talk, but we don't talk shit
Yeah.
about them, and then they're like, "Oh, hey, they said something about us. Maybe we should send them some stuff."
Right.
Yeah.
I like this, putting this out into the universe.
Yeah. It's all about the vibe.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of things that are harmful that have not been vilified in the way that cannabis has. So yeah.
Right. So there's part of that to just show that, yeah, you can be a capable person. You can be a real human being and use cannabis, and, that's fine, right?
Yep.
Like, this is not, a debilitating thing for anybody.
Yep.
Or like in certain cases, right? I'm not going to talk. Addiction is its own thing, right? And you can be addicted to a lot of things.
That's
right. And if you have, you use cannabis in a way that negatively impacts the rest of your life, then that could be seen as an issue, right?
Right.
So,
but
the
you
same
can
with
use alcohol that way.
exercise, food, alcohol, right?
Yep.
That's the threshold that we have for other substances.
Yep.
So there's that. And then I guess the other two parts are, I see that this is kind of maybe the culmination of where I had always wanted to be with science, and doing something that's important for people that I'll see the value of on a daily basis, right? We'll get tests back, we'll give people results, they'll get their products out, those products will be safe, right? We'll have that. I have the background here, and I have a personal affection for the plant.
Giant magnets.
Yeah, giant magnets, right?
And you're a nurse
Yes, so.
as well.
Yeah.
So when did you go to nursing school?
Oh gosh, so I started a couple years ago now.
Yeah.
So I had kind of called it quits in science. I taught for 3 years at St. Olaf. I taught for 1 year up at Metro State. I went into small business. I worked for a startup business here in Minnesota. Then I did another one in California that was cannabis related, where I was the chief scientific officer out there. And then came back here after that one didn't make it, and worked for another startup here. And I was just like, okay.
What kind of startup? Just curious.
The last one?
Yeah.
Med device.
Okay.
So graphene-based med device. I still have stock options. I still hope they do good.
Yeah.
Just we weren't there yet for what I could do.
Yep.
So, but anyways, I said at that point, I'm like, I've been working for other people for a long time. I don't know that that's working for me in this context where I'm expected. The salary life is a little bit different than hourly life, right? Hourly, you get to disconnect. Salary, you are connected and you're getting paid for your time. And I couldn't disconnect personally from that other stuff.
Yeah,
It was too frustrating to watch other people do it in a way that I didn't want it done.
Yep.
Right? So I said, okay, maybe I'm going to do something else. What area can I have the greatest impact, see a daily value to my work, and that I'm still capable of doing, that also has a small educational commitment, right? And so to transition my bachelor's to a bachelor's of nursing was 1 year program. So I said, okay, that I can do, right? I could go back and be an MD. I could go back and try that route, but that's 5 more years at school, and I am schooled out. I've got 20 something already under my belt. I'm good there. Yeah. So I said, nursing is a pathway. To get into something that then, once I'm a nurse, I can do a ton of stuff, right? I can go anywhere. I do cardiac stuff right now.
Yeah, what do you do in nursing? My father was a nurse. My mother, my My brother's a doctor, but my stepmother's a
Yeah.
nurse. Like everyone I know. is a
Yeah,
nurse.
right.
Jen.
So
Friend Jen.
Yep.
Shout out, friend Jen.
Yeah. So I'm a cardiac nurse right
Okay.
now. Heart nurse, not maybe heart nurse is the wrong term to use because has a specific meaning in there. But I'm on the
Okay.
progressive care side, so like not right after surgery for open heart patients and stuff, but like day one afterwards, they're getting moved over to us. We're getting them up and going, making sure that they don't bust their chest back open. That's
Right.
our biggest concern. They don't fall. They don't do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And they're still, they just had their chest cracked open, so there's still a lot of concern that their heart's not going to be going, but they're not ICU level. They don't
Right.
need constant monitoring in the same way, right? So
Can
that's
I
the
ask
level
some
that I
silly
do.
questions about that
Yeah.
real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No silly questions, right? They're
I
all good.
mean,
Yeah, they usually
Getting
are.
your chest cracked open, right? And doing they still do the whole like rib spreader thing and go in there and do surgery and stuff.
I have not watched it personally, so
Okay.
I will not say that. I see them afterwards, but there is a sternal incision that goes from, basically your clavicles up here all the way down, because they do have to, if you're doing what's called a coronary artery bypass graft or cabbage, which is what people consider like an open heart
Okay.
usually. So you had like a quadruple bypass. That's
Yep.
4 vessels in that open heart surgery.
Yeah.
So that is your whole sternum, and then it's opened back up, and then they do whatever magic they do in there, right? It's
Yeah.
taking veins from your leg, and then grafting and bypassing around the ones that are in your heart.
Yeah.
And then they put you back together, and with all the care that they take you open, they put you back together with what looks like 4 twist ties.
It does.
Is what's holding your sternum together. If you
Zip.
ever look at the x-rays, it's like these, I'm sure they're made of titanium or something, but they are legit twisted
Yeah.
by hand
Yeah.
and then folded down or folded around, and then you're stitched over the top of it.
Yep.
So that's what's holding your sternum together until it heals.
Yeah.
Right? It's 4 twist ties.
Yeah.
And so they're just like,
Not
you
even
cannot use
a
your
zip.
arms. Nope.
Not even a zip.
No, you
it's
think they put a
twisted.
zipper in
It's
there,
just a-
right?
It's twisted. Well, I mean, think about what happens when a zip tie breaks. They happen all the time.
Well, but it
But when you
makes
twist,
sense.
twist, it's only because you over twisted it.
Right? Yeah. And they have gone to many years of school to know exactly how much to twist.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what you're paying them for.
I mean, when you think about it, though, that's like that's a pretty straightforward way to do that.
Yes.
To hold
Yeah.
it together, so that do they stay in there forever then? Are
Yeah.
these permanent?
Yep. They just
a permanent fixture?
heals around them, right? They
Is
obviously
titanium-
they suture it, but
Is titanium magnetic?
no.
Does it have?
No, they do when they do like pins and those types of things. They do non-magnetic now. I don't think that they've used magnetic stuff for quite a while since like the MRI tech came out, right? And I'm trying to remember. I think even like, and gosh, don't hold me to this, right? But I think most pacemakers now are good to go in MRIs and stuff. So they just use
think so,
specific
too.
types of metal.
Well,
in
I mean,
there.
they sent a couple of space probes out into interstellar space back in 1960 something.
Yeah.
And those are still sending back data. So there's ways they can make, circuitry and,
Yeah.
and things that last
Yeah.
under the harshest of conditions.
Absolutely.
So the stuff they're throwing in bodies is not magnetic.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
curious, because that
Yeah.
would be.
Wow. I mean, it's a good.
Well,
thoughts, right?
it was a thing, right? It was always the person that's like, I got a plate in my head when they were going through security.
Right.
And they're
Right.
like, well, I've got this and this and, whatever the thing.
I got a bunch of twisties in my chest.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I'm gonna set this thing up. You wouldn't believe it, but it's like I'm a bag of bread.
Yeah.
And they just
They just
twisted
my
me
chest
back
close.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Right.
Okay, so we went and did some nursing and,
Yep.
and still.
And you're still a nurse.
Still a nurse right now. Still doing that.
And where do you work?
So I'm at Regions Hospital.
Okay, great.
So
Cool.
And I want to clarify though, because there is a distinction now. Now I'm not a cannabis nurse.
Yeah,
There
right.
is special certification for that. I don't know if you've had anybody on your show
Really?
that's been one, but there
No.
is special. It's very
Yeah.
recent in the past couple of years, but
And what
there are
does
a
a
few
cannabis
people.
nurse do?
So they're more focused on like how to use the cannabinoids for specific purposes. As far as I
Really?
understand, like sleep, pain, nausea, things like that. They will do more of like a profile with you and how to experience cannabis and how
And
to
this is like
dose
a-
it appropriately.
Program that they go
Yes.
through to learn this stuff?
Yeah, it's like a master's degree, if I'm not mistaken, for most of them. I maybe a certification for some. But yeah, so there are officially kind of licensed cannabis nurses. I am not one of those.
Okay,
So I just want to
that's-
make a clarification.
Medical nurse, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So I do hospital
I mean,
nursing
that has
and
been
stuff
the
like
standard.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You
So,
know?
but I don't want to claim special knowledge in that area.
Sure. So
Right.
do you think
Got it.
it might just be another year
For
to be a cannabis nurse?
oh yeah.
Not that you
probably-
want to go to more school. We already talked about that. But
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it is about a year, maybe a year and a half or two for some of these programs. Most of them are kind of online at this point. Again, I
That
know a
doesn't even
few
sound
people
like-
in the.
It doesn't sound like your passion, though.
I mean, I love all that stuff. I'm not looking to go back to school again.
Yeah. There you
So
go.
that's where I'm at. Like that was kind of my nursing was like, okay, I'm gonna be broad,
Sure.
broadly applicable. You know,
Yeah.
I'm a multi-tool now.
Yeah.
I'm not a specialized tool except
Yeah.
for the testing.
Yeah.
Which came to me kind of so. Realistically, I wanted to do this a couple years back because I was like, the hemp market was blowing up with beverages and everything. And I said, gosh, there's nobody here testing. We had 2 labs in state, but people could send out of state,
Sure.
right? Because
Yep.
it was legal under the Farm Bill. But I was like, gosh, people would probably want to just drop it down the street and then, get it tomorrow morning instead of having to pay FedEx or UPS to ship it overnight and then get results back and then not having any visualization. Like people like to go check out where their stuff's being handled, right?
Sure.
So things like that. So I thought that was like totally viable in 2022, and I will continue to make the argument that it was if anybody had given me money. So, but
It would have been.
It would have been.
It would
right?
have been.
We would have gotten enough customers in Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wisconsin.
Easily.
We would have been able to. We would have been the state's lab right now.
Right.
If we had been enabled at that point.
Yeah.
But so we weren't, and things go a different direction, and I backburned all that, all the business plans, financials, all that kind of stuff, just sitting in a folder on my computer. And my father-in-law came to me and said, like, he was retiring, and he's like, I have this consultant that I worked with, and he was a director of microbiology and sterilization at Medtronic. So he's like, I have this consultant that I worked with, and she's expressed interest in like the cannabis space, so you should get in touch with her. And so we did, and that initial conversation is kind of where we decided like, okay, we can do this. She had the connections within the industry already because she was looking and working in that space, and I had the time, right, and the vision for it. She's doing other things now too. This is not her 100%.
Right.
But
Not yet.
not yet, right? Maybe at some point it could be, but like right now, split attention.
Yeah.
So I was the driving force. I'm the person making all the accounts and making all the phone calls and all that kind of stuff. And she's on the micro and sterilization side. So my background's analytical chemistry, which is more like if you're talking about tests, you're talking about the potency, the terpenes, the pesticides, mycotoxins, heavy metals. That's all on the analytical side.
Yep.
And then you're looking at like micro tests, so salmonella and different the aspergillus stuff, all those types of things. That's her side.
Great.
Right.
Okay.
So we kind of have both of those things going for us, right? I have a lot of micro experience, but she's got, regulated
who is
industry
she?
micro experience. Molly
Yeah.
Holter is my business partner. She's fantastic. She runs her own consulting company also on the side, doing all kinds of like sterilization and micro work for big companies.
Okay.
Right. I won't
Sure.
say her client list, but like, but names that you would know.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And
Some big deals out there.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in the Twin Cities that, big names that need those services, right?
Yeah, how do you
And so-
think the dust gets on the Cheetos?
Right.
You
Exactly.
need somebody like that for that.
Right.
You wouldn't think it, but
Right.
how's the dust get on the Cheeto?
100%. 100%.
Nobody thinks
So-
about it.
Yeah. So we came.
Magic.
Delicious though.
Yeah.
Magic Cheeto
Magic
dust.
Cheeto dust, right?
Yeah.
It's magnetic. The actual puff of the Cheeto is magnetic. And
What did
this
I-
just
I love it.
Oh, they've magnetized the
They
Cheeto.
magnetize the Cheeto, and then they demagnetize it afterwards.
no,
just so
your
you don't-
saliva does it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew there
this
was
is
something.
true
Yeah,
science.
you get
Yeah.
it grounds you.
Wait until that short goes out.
Right.
Cheeto does.
Cheeto dust.
Oh my goodness. Back to it.
Yeah. No, so we got together, and we probably started doing this about 2 weeks before the deadline for the application for the social equity round
sure.
was.
Okay.
So we didn't get in on that.
So fresh.
Fresh. So we started that up, but I was like, we can make some stuff happen. And then luckily, my, again, retired father-in-law now at Medtronic did fairly well for himself and said, like, we'll help you start up this venture, right?
Yeah,
You got
amazing.
what we need. And then we finally got some banking to work with us, which has been near impossible for any tangible amounts, right?
Right, because it's cannabis.
Because it's cannabis, because licenses aren't out yet,
Yeah.
right? That's a huge one. And just, risky. Risky business. Yeah, I'm still a startup business. I'm pre-licensure startup, right?
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
that's a hard sell for most banks on a large amount of money, and we found one that would work with us. And
Great.
So we have, we were able to do that. So that's what's made it real at this point. So our push right now is to, we have our cannabinoid testing online. Where we can do kind of R&D stuff, internal use, home growers. That's a big market that we're targeting right now, is saying home growers, like if you want to know, what your potency is, and we do all the minors as well, or at least a majority of the minors.
Great.
So THC, we do CBD, CBC, CBN, CBG, THCV, and the acid components of all of those, right?
Okay.
So you can get those full profiles on our machine. And
So
then,
is it a matter of like, do you have a like a building somewhere,
Yes.
like a facility
Yeah.
that is your building?
we do now.
Does
yeah.
it say PhytoLab?
It does say PhytoLab
somewhere?
It doesn't say. Well, it will. Sorry, it will November 4th when the sticky arrives in the mail.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, it does. But it doesn't have a big pot leaf on it or anything like that.
No,
We're yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
We're not trying to draw a bunch of attention to ourselves, but we do have a facility now. We're looking at just shy of 9,000 square feet that we have.
Wow.
We're in discussions right now to get a clean room space put into it. It won't be effectively like an ISO 8 clean room or anything like that, but just a cleanable room set up that we will clean in the same way for all of our analytical equipment. So it's going to look, going back to like legitimization of the industry, right? It's going to look like a real lab. It's going to be a real lab.
And be official.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's our goal.
It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
That it's for the industry to move itself forward like that, it's got to look like a legit thing.
Yeah. And it has to, we have an industry standard that we have to live up to, and it's ISO 17025, right? And it's for all analytical labs. It's not specific to cannabis in any way, shape, or form. So if you're doing plant testing for ag, if you're doing soil testing, if you're doing any analytical testing, that's what we live up to, right? So we're operating, in compliance with those, but we still have to get certified from those bodies, and that takes time. And this is where you can get to like, when are we going to actually have a legal cannabis market and stuff like that too?
Sure.
But this process takes time, right? If you look it up, it'll tell you 6 to 18 months to get that process start to finish.
Yeah.
Right? So, these are long scale things. So currently we can only offer like the R&D testing and stuff like that.
And then home grow stuff, right?
Home grow stuff, right?
So friend Jen grew a plant.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of cool. Plant outside.
We're
Beautiful.
allowed 8, right?
We're allowed 8, 4.
4 in flower and 4 non.
Yep.
Gosh, just a sponge.
I'm learning.
Right?
I am learning
Sponge over
shit.
here.
Yeah.
A sponge in his 50s. That's fascinating that you remember those things because it's important, right?
I am fascinated by all this. Yeah.
It is. It's super cool. And so this plant was just this beautiful, beautiful plant. But it'd be great to understand what the potency is. It'd be great to understand what the level of minors are in there. It would be great to understand that, somehow within my trimming or somehow within, burping the jars in my basement, that something didn't flop on in there that's you can't see with your eye, but you could know with this test, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of things in our lives that we won't go and do because there's some form of barrier there, whether it be a financial barrier, a time barrier, you name whatever the barrier may be, right? So what does it look like for somebody like I go and I grow a plant.
Yep.
If you would be able to grow pants, that would be cool. But
Imagine that plant.
I know.
You should be like
A pant plant?
Yeah, pant plant.
That's a
in your
pant plant.
backyard.
It's amazing. How did you grow all of that?
Oh, it'd have to.
Your
it'd have to
denim
be
looks
like
wonderful.
Like not like hammer pants though, or whatever.
Those would
no.
be cool too.
Well,
Zubas?
like
Yeah.
Zubas and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, does it come from? Like, is it a zebra plant?
I don't know, but
Okay. So back to plants. Harvest has happened.
Yeah.
Right. And there's twofold. One is how the hell does it get in there, and then secondary, right? Like how did I submit to
Yes.
you? And then secondarily, is there a preferred, right? So I don't have zero idea on this answer. I'm not a grower. I'm just, I find people that do
just
and they give me
benefit from the
things.
folks who do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Right?
So, we've harvested, we've dried,
Yep.
we're curing right now. Right, you can grab it off of the plant. You can test it. You can test it anytime in all of this. Correct me if I'm wrong. Right.
Yeah.
But what is the optimal time for somebody to submit their sample? If there's only one, or if there's a couple of different times that make a ton of sense, then let us know.
I think that the most relevant time for the end consumer is going to be the product they intend to consume.
Right.
Right. So
Yep.
if it's
Makes sense.
yeah, if you're smoking flower, then once you've cured, dried, gotten it ready to go, you want to grind it up and start smoking it. That's when you would send it to me. Right.
Okay.
So that's what I would think. The only other time I would think would be super useful for some people is if you are doing some kind of extraction process, like you're making weed butter or anything like that. It might be useful to know before you start kind of how much to expect that you're going to get out. And at the very least, it would be probably very good for most people to actually test like the final butter, just a little bit of that to know milligrams per gram when they're dosing their final product.
Right.
Right. So if you're interested in the science of the extraction and you're trying to optimize that process, do you test before and after? If you're just interested in, how do I make sure that this brownie doesn't, keep me locked in my house for the next 24 hours?
Right.
Right.
We've talked about those brownies.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
So,
If you haven't had one, it doesn't mean you have to.
No, you don't have to.
Don't do it.
I had some fun, but
Sure.
it's but you wouldn't. But like
Glandor
we're
had some
talking
thoughts,
about-
if I remember
Let
correctly.
your tolerance work up in the 5 milligram market.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's the general like push for most people is like if I've known many stories where it's just like, again, I took a little bit, I didn't feel it, I took more, and then I really felt it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just not smart for most people who are naive to cannabis.
Agreed.
Right?
I mean-
like go slow and slow, right? You didn't down a bottle of whiskey the first time you drank.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
You had a drink and you were like, okay, and then I had another one, and then you probably had too many. But
Yes.
Yeah.
right? But at least you
But
started
you had
slow.
so much fun.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Until you
Started
didn't.
Slow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You're
I
not
think that-
21 having a bourbon, a scotch, and a beer,
Yeah.
which I have
Right.
done with a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about right.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I
Some of
mean,
them.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The market that is opening up, the much larger market that's opening up, is people who are going to consume in 5 milligram
Yeah.
doses.
Yeah.
Not people who are going to smoke a ton of pot. Like
Right.
there's
right.
the people who enjoy smoking pot. I mean, there will be people who age into that. Who there will still be a market out
Yeah.
there of people who want to smoke pot. But the much larger market is the person who wants to stop by the same place they might buy alcohol and say, you know what, I'm going to go with this instead.
Yeah.
And it's that's going to be great.
Yeah.
But that's where the testing and
Right. Yeah. And ultimately, right, like our market is these certificates of analysis. That is like
Right.
what we would call a full spectrum panel, right? Where you
that's a great name.
yeah, right?
Full spectrum
Right.
cannabis panel.
I wonder where we got it.
Anyway.
Spectrum? What?
So yeah, exactly.
So,
perfect.
But how does somebody get
Get
their
it.
sample to you,
Get it
and
to
then
us.
we can continue?
Yeah. So we have our website up and running right now. So basically, we have like a list of instructions on there, broken
Right.
out into like 4 steps. Effectively, you would come on, you would identify what type of test you want, right? So do you have a gummy that you already have? Are you testing flower? Do you have a concentrate or an isolate, or even in the case of like a beverage, right? We can test beverages. So you identify what type of sample. There's slightly different price points for each of those because there's more sample prep involved in some versus others,
Sure.
right? So you pick your samples, and then you purchase just through a standard web interface, right? You identify
So
one.
you go right
two
on the
flowers.
website and say, check the box, check the box, I'm
Yep.
checking out, just like
Just
Amazon.
like that.
Sure.
Yep, exactly. So that's
Also
the
not a
service
sponsor.
piece of it, right? Yeah.
Right.
We all wish, you know. if I could get
What up,
something from them, too.
AWS? Let's go.
Yes.
Okay.
But so yeah, so you go on there, you make your order. The other piece of paperwork we want you to fill out is called a chain of custody.
Yep.
COC, right? And that just gives us more information about your sample, right? Like first and foremost, where do we send the results, right? Who do we send it to? And then other things like what do you call it? What batch is it to you? Right?
Yep.
Like, is this the third time you've grown this plant and you want to know between 1, 2, and 3, which one was the best?
Sure.
You know, little things like that that aren't super crucial. And then any other notes.
until
they are.
Until they are.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then they are crucial as far as batch and
Yep.
fun things like that when you're scanning a QR code that's on a product that has to have the QR code in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
100%.
Then it has to match the batch.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's a big, that'll be a big thing for us in that when it gets down to that is making those, what do they call them? Non-fungible, right? Not mess up.
Yeah.
You can't mess with them that you're going to know as soon as you scan that's bogus. That connection is not correct.
Yep.
Right? Something's not going to match on there.
Yep.
But anyways, as far as like people getting samples to us now, you fill out that COC. That just gives us more information about everything and how to get back to you and all that. And then you are going to drop your sample off.
Yep.
Right. So you're going to get it, and we're getting packaging put together. That's going to be little containers that you'll drop your sample into, and then they'll just close, or they'll be like the little weed bags that they have now for like an eighth. You'll drop your bud into there, and we'll talk a little bit more about sampling in a second. But we're looking at like 1.5 to 2 grams. If you're buying eighths at a time, that's a lot. If you're growing plants, it's very little. Right. If you have a
Agreed.
whole plant, 1 or 2 grams is not going to significantly impact your harvest, hopefully.
What's it? So right now we're just doing potency.
Yep.
And minors.
Yep.
Right. And terpenes. You were saying
No, not terpenes yet. Yeah, so that's another
So terpenes
level
are
up.
coming.
Terpenes are coming.
And full panel
Full panel
is
yep.
coming. So that's your mycotoxins and
Yep.
all of the other fun things that we were talking about earlier. Okay. And like, what is it? So what's it cost me?
Yeah. So we are still like in that set of discussions. Today it's going to cost you $37.50 to do a flower cannabinoid profile.
$37.50.
$37.50. We've
I
got
was saying 3,000.
no.
I mean, I kind of knew it wasn't that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you're
but-
writing different
you
levels
never
of checks, and
Yep.
$37.50 is something that comes up a decent
That's a-
amount when you're
Yeah.
talking about sponsorships.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I mean, it's not going to be $37.50 for a
So
sponsorship,
$40
but-
bucks.
Yeah, $40
Give or
right
take.
now. We're hoping that's our like startup sale type price. We're hoping
Yeah.
to keep it under 50 because
Sounds
I think
great.
50
I have a
bucks is
sample for you already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's amazing.
No, I mean that's very approachable.
Yes.
Like if you're growing a plant in your backyard, you're taking all summer long to do all the
Yes.
things you have to do, and you really want to know about it.
Right.
$50 is well worth it, I would
Right.
say.
For sure.
And that's my goal here, right? We're going to charge industries, more because so like the home grower, what do they really want to know? They want to know their potency, right? What does industry want to know? They want to know that somebody's got their back,
Right.
if they get challenged down the road.
Yep.
Right? That comes with more validation testing. That comes with more risk on our side
Yeah.
for things and everything. So their pricing is going to be different. But if
Of
you're
course.
a home grower in Minnesota, or even if you're like a startup business that's trying to like break into the space, right? We're going to keep that. If you want something that, again, we can't do COAs right now, but if you want something that approaches the style of testing that you will get for a COA, we can do that as well.
Right. But
And
it's not.
It's
all-
would
it's
not
like-
substitute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that doesn't work, but we
Yes.
can get you information. So as a secondary test,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you've got your main, right? So I've got my main tests.
Mm-hmm.
But when we want to look at shelf stability, making sure that there isn't anything falling out of suspension, making, all of that kind of stuff that we've talked about on previous
Mm-hmm.
episodes that we don't need to get into right now. But the secondary test, for me, I pull a 4-pack every single time there's a batch. I pull a 4-pack,
Yep.
right? And it just sits there with a sticky note on it to when I decide I'm going to do something about it. But I can, now that I have 4 of them, I can test it 6 months. Probably not going to have to worry about it because the batch is gone and sold through. Thank you, Minnesota and beyond.
Yep.
But then I can test at 6 months on a batch that's already gone, that's not even probably living in the world, but who knows? It might be in Sam's cupboard, right? Either way, great for me to be able to understand what potency looks like at that point.
6 months down the road.
Yeah, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, right?
I mean, do these have expiration dates on them?
Technically, no, they don't have expiration
but we're
dates
going to
on
have
them.
to figure out all that stuff at some
Drinks
point.
don't, yeah, so there will be like as far as I understand the way the current rules are set up,
Right.
there's going to be like a shelf life, like sell by.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what people are going to do. But the reality is that people are going to want to get their stuff on the shelves. They're going to assume that it's going to move in days and not months. They're going to test it for 2 weeks, show it's boop, boop.
Yeah.
You know, we're good for 2 weeks. If you don't sell it, you got to throw it away. Or whatever then it goes gray or whatever.
Yeah.
But, that's what people are going to do at the beginning.
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
test
it's
it
just
for as
like
little
anything
as-
else.
Yeah, minimal viable product, right?
Yeah.
At that point. So, but again, in the testing space, like you're right, like doing long-term testing, but even things like while the batch is running, right? While people are developing new recipes and stuff like that, you have to dial in. When you get a new piece of equipment that hasn't been coated with all of your THC stuff already, you're gonna have to figure out how much you're losing on each batch as you go through, and you wanna be able to do that right away. Right? You want to be able to, you want me to, and so what we do offer too is we can come to you, right? We sit there as you're doing your batch, you can siphon it right off your bright tank into our sample thing. We will prep it, run it, 15 minutes later you can know, so your bright tanks aren't sitting for days at a time to redose, right? Or if you get your canning facility goes down and you've got to hold it for 10 days, right? We can tell you if you got to redose. And then you don't have to go through the whole big process for the COAs again. You just know we're just redosing.
We potency test before we can. Right. And almost, as far as I know, almost everybody is doing the exact same thing.
And
because you come back and then all of a sudden your can says this, and now all of a sudden you're getting the sticker labeler out, and that's no fun when you're talking about thousands and thousands of cans.
No.
Right?
No. So we can save you. The idea is hopefully that lab testing, I'm not saying PhytoLab in specific, but like lab testing in general should be seen as like a preventative cost-saving measure.
Agreed.
Right. We can come in and we can, again, with our experience in the industry, most people that are in this don't know what they don't know, right? I'm not going to come in and tell you how to grow. I'm not going to tell you how to do production. What I'm going to tell you is that's a potential for contamination. This process is not going to be, viable for you long term if you don't want to have to be throwing away a third of your batches because you don't mop your floor right or whatever it is. Right? Or you don't have the drains in place, or like where is your place to wash people's hands? Like we know more about that stuff as well. We know the technical side of the testing. Like we want, but we figure broader scale, right? I get more tests when you do better. Right. You are the better business. Your product is out there. You're never having to fail. Like I want to help people never fail, because that's an awkward conversation I got to have. Sorry, you got to throw away $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 worth of product.
Right.
Some cases millions if you really
Screw
something up.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, we cost few grand, but if we can tell you that that's $10 million worth of worries off your plate, then maybe we come out ahead in that.
It makes sense.
So, and that's kind of where we're shooting for with the business side of it.
So is getting PhytoLab to the point of being, what it eventually is going to be?
Yeah.
Is that I'm guessing that one part of it is you're waiting for the state to do certain things.
Yep.
And then another part of it is like this is all just fancy equipment you have to buy and learn.
And get set
Get
up,
ready on and
validated.
and- yeah.
So, I mean, it is twofold, right? We are looking to operate in a way that is currently legal within the state.
Yeah.
Right? So we're not testing recreational cannabis in any way, shape, or form for like consumer
To be sold.
consumption. To be sold, right?
Correct.
Like we're just home growers and we're doing R&D, internal stuff, because the state hasn't given us the numbers that we actually need.
Yep.
I don't know what pesticides we're looking for. I don't know what the thresholds that they want to know at. I don't know what other chemicals they want us to test for or specifics. Like I have a broad idea. We know sort of what the medical side is doing, and kind
Yep.
of these general things, but
Yeah.
it's going to be more. Like the lists are too short.
The rules aren't all
currently.
drawn up yet.
They are not all drawn up yet, and we're attempting, as well as other people in like the testing area and space, which there's not many of us, right? Like it's very
No.
under. If you looked at the numbers for the social equity round, 5 applications out of 50 spots, it was the only one that didn't fill, right, was testing. So there's not, and then Kentucky had 2 that applied for their whole state.
I mean,
so
let's be fair though, this whole testing side of things is ultra important, but it also requires it requires advanced degrees. And there are other places you could, I'm sure that there are jobs you could get that pay a lot of money that aren't this risky. So why
Right.
would a lot of people get into testing?
yeah,
you know?
yeah. Well, and again, there's still the stigma around it. You've spent all these years putting letters behind your name,
Yep.
right? And then to come out and say like, "Oh, I
I'm
like
cannabis."
right? Then there's a risk there. So I think that's why you don't see as many credentialed people as there should be.
Yep.
And especially as many credentialed people as exist.
Right.
Yeah,
Right?
or any
'Cause
other
they're not
industry is gonna
talking.
draw.
Yeah, they're not talking about. They exist. They are part of it. They are working on it.
They'll come when the money's there.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, they're in the mainstream,
yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's just how it goes.
yeah. And this is still the same issues, right? If you step out of Minnesota, right? Wisconsin doesn't feel the same about cannabis as Minnesota does.
Yeah.
Right. So there's just a whole different. You got to always worry about that.
And are you part of the this caucus thing that
Audie's
Audie's
working
working
on?
on?
Yeah, we're trying to
Michael?
put some of that stuff together just so that we can be.
I've
Yeah.
only made it to one
Yeah.
meeting. Were you
Yep.
there the other day? No.
Not yesterday, but
Yeah.
last week I was.
Do you know about it?
No.
Okay, so we'll
I
get
think you mentioned something about something.
we'll get you and Calandra involved too.
Yeah.
But it's just a business owners caucus to help advocate for legislation, legislative policy that makes sense and helps preserve kind of the craft cannabis industry in
Right.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
How do we make sure somehow you don't make some form of rule or regulation that just goes bye?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Inadvertently pushes us.
Right. Exactly.
So.
Yep. So, all of this stuff is important, and I think that the Minnesota is doing a really cool thing with cannabis.
I love the idea, right, in what they're doing, and I think that we need, especially on the testing side. I have not pushed back against any of the regulation that they're putting down on it because I'm like, we need these things. It needs to be safe.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm a firm believer in we don't need to reinvent the wheel either. Right? There's a lot of other states that are most of the way to what we want to do. Like, instead of making a new wheel, why don't we make super cool rims
Yeah.
for the wheel that we
let's look at
already
what's
have?
out
Right.
there. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, they're in a position that's unenviable, right?
Yeah.
And the people that have been put into those positions are explicitly not cannabis people, right? Because you could not be a long-term bureaucrat and be a cannabis person,
Right.
right? And that's not a slight on anybody. It's
No, it's
just
just
a
the
reality. But if they were doing tobacco or alcohol, they probably have an idea or some exposure. But they're regulating something they have very little exposure to.
Yeah.
Well, and also, are they enjoying what is their history with it?
Yeah.
Right. Like, when I was in college is what you usually
That's
hear.
me.
Right?
Yeah.
You usually hear when I was in college, and so when you were in college is way different than now when you would be in this type of capacity.
Yeah.
With the state of Minnesota, and the state of Minnesota still, to my knowledge, is requiring drug testing.
I think it depends. Now that's
Probably
one area- I'm not
depends,
100%
but-
sure. I know that there's certain areas that still can drug
Sure.
test, right? But for the broad scale, I think in employment at least that they have put something down that says you can't test in that context
Well,
for
that'd be
employment.
lovely.
Yeah.
Good.
So I think you can still test after, if somebody gets in an accident.
Well, yeah,
Try and determine
sure.
whether they were under the influence.
Sure.
That's a much more complicated,
That's a whole
testing, regimen as well. I don't know how you actually do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So a lot of stuff with that. But I'm hoping, at least, and my understanding is that we are free from that.
That
at
would
least
be
in
great.
employment here.
Yeah,
I was
cool.
more just thinking it was kind of funny because I had seen like a posting that said, well, drug free workplace, and
Oh, yeah.
and I'm like, but that's for the Office of Cannabis Management?
Yeah.
Like how, so the people that go out and are the inspectors, and right now we're just informing folks and things like that, and you go into a retail location, you're like, well, this certificate of analysis that's in here doesn't match this batch code and whatever is going on there. That person gets drug tested? Like, I mean, I just
Right?
what?
Right?
I mean, I suppose, but
hope not.
you're probably working. You could probably work at General Mills in some like high end capacity, high end job.
Well, I mean, this is legal.
Well, correct, but it doesn't. But if it's private, if it's a private
I know.
company,
I know.
corporation, public traded, none of those things actually matter. They get to make their mind up on
Yeah.
what they want it to
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
right? But if it's the state, that's more what I was talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and they're looking for people right now at the state that
Yeah.
they're trying. It seems like they are trying to bring in some experience, but again, it's tough if there is like a drug test. I don't know if there is. Like,
I
but
mean,
you're just like
probably isn't.
it's the same idea, like as to why skateboarding at the Olympics is no good, right? Because everybody who skateboards smokes weed, and they can't pass the Olympic drug test. So that's why Tony Hawk is not the Olympic skateboarder, right?
That's why
It's because
they're all 12.
yeah,
They're all 12
right?
because they can pass
the
it.
drug test.
They can pass it.
You know, and so it's just one of those things where you don't get the best group of people at that if you're imposing arbitrary restrictions, especially that are related to their line of work,
Correct.
right? To
We're going to
understand.
have to, I mean, things are changing.
Yeah.
That's the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
point,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And
This is the start.
It
right?
is.
This is the start. All of us want to be in the end zone already, and it's like it's all right. We're on the field.
Yeah.
Right. We're
Yeah.
on the field. We're making some plays. Yeah, sure. The ref's like every once in a while, but we at some point in time we're gonna hit that end.
I
zone.
mean, largely incarcerating people for marijuana hasn't happened for a few years, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just like not a
Largely.
thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a thing.
I mean,
Still a thing.
it's still a thing, but it's
People are,
not.
yes.
Not for minor quantities of.
Correct.
Just like like the old days,
Yeah.
where it was like you had to be really worried that you had any with you.
Should we test it? Right? Like, just be like, Lance is out driving around and he's got 3 ounces on him, and just see what happens.
I don't know.
I don't
I'm
know
not
that
going to.
I don't know that I want to figure it
Yeah.
out, but am I going to county? Right?
Who knows?
I mean, should we call the sheriff? Should we have the sheriff on?
So-
that's a good idea. Let's get the sheriff. Ooh,
Right.
wonder what we
Let's-
could pull off there.
Let's get a sheriff on. Why not?
Sounds
I
great.
mean, everybody's going to have to figure out how to make all of this work. It's
Right.
that's the world we're in. Is
Yeah.
things have changed, or they're in the process of change, and we've got to figure out how to work together and not screw it all up again.
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's not going to be the same as it was.
No, it's certainly not. And I think that, like, especially in the testing area, there's no room for, like, Wild Westing it, right? Like, we need I mean, when we're talking about, like, being on the field and everything, too, right? Testing is the choke point for, like, getting down the field.
Right.
Because without testing, without this component of it, you cannot legally sell your product.
That's right.
And
yeah, you're on the bench.
Cannot and should
Yep.
not.
And
you know?
should not, right?
Agreed.
You know, and then when it becomes legal recreational cannabis, you cannot move it across state lines, otherwise it becomes a federal crime. So all of the places that we can send current ones to in Arizona and California and Colorado and North Dakota, and you know, we can't do that anymore.
Right.
So now the state has one and a half facilities that are doing it right now, and they are doing it for just the medical side, right? And not like they're not building out a new facility, right, to do the recreational stuff. So they might be saturated or close to saturated with that. So then where do all the Island Pezzy stuff come in?
I know where.
Northern tribes, right?
Yeah,
Like,
at PhytoLab.
yeah. Well,
And
we
then
would
4
hope,
others,
but-
apparently.
Well, well, and again, we probably need 10. Right. So
Oh,
that's
probably.
the issue right
Yeah.
now is that
Yeah.
even if I get up and going, I'm not like, this is not cheap equipment.
No,
right?
no.
We're talking over $1 million worth of equipment alone just to get these
Yeah.
things running. So I can't just double my production overnight.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big
Right.
outlay for me. So
A
I
lot
have to
of
start
capital.
slow. And so we need 10 to 15 labs starting slow and building out, you know, to service the need that
some
will
of
come
them
up.
some of them will, fail, and then you still have
Yeah.
enough.
People
Yeah.
will go up and down. I mean, you have to have more try than you ultimately will get, right? Because
Sure.
there's always going to be some attrition in there, even
Yep.
just family stuff, right? Like
Right.
some bad could happen to one person, and
Yeah,
that
it's
business
just the
goes
way it
away. It
works.
doesn't have to be a bad business,
Yeah.
Yep.
right?
That's
So
just
we
how
need
it
more.
works.
We need more. So anybody who's interested, talk
Yeah.
to me,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah. Can we get some more labs going? Anybody
Yeah.
else got some extra scratch laying
yeah,
around?
right.
Let's start a lab.
I mean, I feel
100%.
about ready to.
I know.
Yeah,
All
why
you got to
not?
do is find the smart people to do it.
To
You
run
just
it.
Need to have
Get
the
in.
cash.
Yeah.
Right.
Just the cash.
Hop on board.
Me too.
Okay. That's about
7 hours into this.
Oh yeah.
it's about as much fun as we can handle. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah,
Right.
That's
and I'm
part of our thing.
learning a lot all the time, actually, about the old cannabis industry here and how it's working.
We'll just get Sam we'll get Sam a couple of seeds for next to his fence for next year.
I mean, I mean, they call it weed for a reason, right? If you like, you just need sunlight and water and dirt, and it'll grow, right?
will.
Yeah.
You know, you can make it better or worse.
Yeah.
But it'll grow for you.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Yeah, that's what I
It's
hear.
good fun.
Yeah.
Get your hands in the dirt.
Excellent.
I like it. All right, well, Casey, thanks so much for joining us and
Yeah.
sharing your knowledge. And I mean, we did start this show early on when I was thinking about this. I was thinking that we would be like cannabis news, but we're not fast enough. You know, like
You can't get enough information across that.
no, we're
fast.
like so it's turned into just stories from those in the industry in Minnesota, and highlighting people who are doing this work. And I like that.
I like that too.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's been great. So really good to get to know you better, and
Yeah.
I look forward to visiting your lab someday.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.